raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Of Q broadcast, it's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Stars. And the best part, there are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
Since 2017, 150,000 farms have shut down. Working farmland has been reduced by 21 million acres. The system has been crippling the remaining farmers, forcing some to adopt nefarious farming techniques, like pumping hormones and other performance-enhancing drugs into their cows so they can survive in crammed feedlots. Or the farmers are forced to jump ship and sell to land-hoarding, profit-chasing agricultural oligarchies, who use their billions of dollars to crush the competition and increase your family's dependence on their manufactured food. What could possibly go wrong? The family farm will soon be a thing of the past, unless you do something. You can. That's why there's From the Farm, an industry-disrupting platform that connects consumers directly with local farmers, which means you can buy fresh, non-factory farm food, and you'll know exactly where your food came from and how it was raised. For the first time in nearly 100 years, independent farms will have a way to not only survive, but thrive. From the Farm was founded by A.J. Richards, an active homesteader, and Brooke Entz, a CrossFit Games athlete and an Amazonian warrior in the movies Wonder Woman and Justice League. She clearly has a passion for healthy food and a healthy lifestyle. And since both AJ and Brooke come from generations of ranchers and farmers, they know what they're talking about. We can't do this alone. We need the strength of the American people behind us. Help us build a new food system that combines the wisdom of the past with the technology of the future. Investing in From the Farm isn't just a financial decision. It's an investment into our future, our small family farms, and our food sovereignty. Invest today.
Nate, I am not getting audio out of you. I'm sorry. Checking on my end really quick. Says I got everything running in. I didn't hear you on the intro either, but I did catch the commercials. Commercials came in just fine. Not sure if something happened in there.
Oh, there we go. How's that?
That's it.
It was on my end. Yeah.
Excellent.
My mute button was hit. So that's a first. Hey, folks. Again, I apologize for the issue there with the sound, but we've got that fixed. So tonight on the Raising Cain show, we are joined by Sam Shoemate, a former Army intelligence officer turned whistleblower, exposing corruption and unlawful mandates in the military. Now he is fighting for God, country, and truth with Remnant Ministries and Doc Pete Chambers to combat human trafficking and restore freedom in Texas. Stay tuned for an uninterrupted conversation here, folks. This is going to be a great one, I think, tonight, and you're definitely going to want to hear this. Make sure and like and subscribe to the channel and share this out to other people so that they can hear it tonight. But thank you, folks, for sticking with this. So, Sam, thank you so much for joining the show tonight. I think a lot of people may not have heard your story, so maybe that's a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about your story, what led up to you blowing the whistle on corruption in the military.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. If I have any issues, I want to let your audience know I'm sitting in a motorhome right now on a Starlink, and we just got hit by a big storm, and my uplink is being ugly tonight. All right, so my story. So I served 21 years in the Army, sometime around the 16, 17, maybe 18-year mark. I'm not sure when it was, maybe 18-year mark. I was a chief warrant officer too, and COVID was not going on yet. It was at the infancy of it. People were getting sick. They didn't quite know what was going on. But at the same time, I started a social media page to make jokes, to make memes. It was not meant to be serious. I wanted to make some funnies. Shortly after that, in April, the military goes into lockdown, right? And we have COVID and the scariest thing in the world, blah, blah, blah. And so May or June timeframe, I want to say May, and this is 2020. I start getting, let me back up. My page was military centric. Okay, the name of my page, this was on Instagram. It was called Terminal CWO. I'm on Instagram, Telegram, and technically on Truth Social, but I don't use it. Anyways, the page is called Terminal CWO, and it's a chief warrant officer is primarily thought of as a pilot in the military, even though we have a lot of technicians. I'm a technician myself, but it got connected. Just a lot of pilots started coming forward and connecting to the page because of kind of humor I was putting out and everything. And in that time, people started messaging me from Fort Rucker specifically. Fort Rucker is the home of aviation in the military. And
Yep.
people started telling me some crazy things that were going on at their command. They were students in training. I had cadre corroborating stuff. And when I first started getting these messages, I was like, this is crazy. This must be the most corrupt command in the world. I was shocked by the kind of stuff I was hearing. And I just said, this is either not real or this is an isolated incident. Well, as time went on, it started to grow. And I started, as I started to put out these stories really in a junior style. I didn't have any experience in investigative journalism, even though I was an intelligence officer and I had written many reports and all that stuff. This was a new realm for me. So I started just putting this content out, and I was corroborating it and investigating it with some other folks. And that summer really kicked off the craziness of the start of COVID. And it was around July, and we started getting a lot of messages. It wasn't just me, it was other social media pages, but we started getting reports of service members that were being denied medical care, were being forced to go to the field with 104-degree fevers, really wild stuff. And we started to see these spouse pages, and they were blowing up and attacking the installation. And I focused my efforts on the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell. And what I saw was this blatant attempt to lie and cover up from their PAO what was going on. He was going directly on these spouses' pages and then on his own page, and he was refuting everything they were saying. They were saying things like, our husbands are being forced to go to the field. They're wrapping engineer tape around the trees and calling it a quarantine area. My husband has 104.2-degree fever. Really crazy stuff. And so
what time frame was this around?
This was July of 2020. So this was
Wow.
prior to the mandate, prior to a vaccine, prior to anything else.
Yeah.
COVID was, everything was a lockdown. And what had happened was the military came out with a policy that said, if you test positive for COVID, you are automatically quarantined for 2 weeks. Well, what happened was everybody was testing positive for COVID, and these commanders were losing their formations.
Yeah.
They were losing, and you know as well as I do, to test properly, to train properly, you have to have a certain percentile to go do this training. So if it's 90% for whatever event, you have to have 90% of your formation show up, and the commander simply didn't have it. And this wasn't isolated to the 101st. This was all over the military. We saw this at dozens of installations all across all branches. And basically the order came out that said, if you think you are sick, you have to come to the commander first and get the commander's say so and approval to go to the med station, to go to sick call. To be seen by a provider, you have to get the commander's approval. Commanders were denying this across the board. And so they had formations full of sick soldiers, and they were taking them to the field. They were wrapping quarantine tape around the trees. They were giving them ibuprofen and water. And in fact, one case, I had a medic come to me, and he said he was threatened with an Article 15 because he had seen one of his soldiers, and the commander came at him and said, you disobeyed a direct order. I'm going to give you an Article 15 if you do it again. And so medics couldn't even provide first-line care for their troops in some cases because the commanders had made it off limits so they wouldn't lose their force. So when I saw this, I was like, this is nuts. In fact, at the time, Yahoo got caught wind of this story, and they approached me, one of the reporters at Yahoo. This is still out there, but that was the first one that was picked up by the media. And they wrote their own story on it and covered it. And then, of course, the DOD had to tap dance on that one. And that started a long journey of many ethical and criminal incidents of people coming to me, dumping stuff on my lap. I built up a reputation of not burning my sources, making sure that people were protected, covering stories, fighting for service members' rights if they had lost all recourse in a legal manner to take care of themselves. And I could tell they would send me their entire packet of information. I'm like, dude, you're getting hosed. I started reporting on this stuff. And so I quickly made myself publicly public enemy number one of many installations. In fact, I had multiple CID agents inbox message me and say, yeah, our CG came to the station today and wanted us to open an investigation to find out who you were. And we told them, we're not investigating a meme page. But this progressed. And obviously, I think you have seen my story. I sent it to your producer, but basically, at some point, I was doxxed, and a lieutenant general in the background, and I didn't even know this for 8 months while I was under a legal investigation. I was legally being investigated by 3 Corps Command, but another 3-star general had started another investigation prior to this, along with other members of the military, and she was using government resources to include the heads of counterintelligence and the heads of criminal investigation division to try to label me as an insider threat and a foreign intelligence threat. And my page had been one, somebody else had done the reporting, but my page had been one that had actually reported on her for covering up a founded investigation into a command sergeant major. So this was the journey of exposing stuff. And
what you're talking about.
Yeah, go ahead.
What you're talking about, there was so much stuff that was just insane and crazy going on. I've got a son who's still in the military, and at that time that COVID was going on, he was at his A school at Fort Gordon, and he contacted me, and he told me, this was like right when they started the lockdowns, and he says, "Dad, they're not feeding us." And I go, "What do you mean?" And he said, they basically were making them stand 6 feet apart, and then they were closing down the DFAC after a certain hour. So basically they were in the line waiting for 3 hours, and they shut the doors and didn't feed him. And then they went back, and he got it on video of the, basically his drill sergeant, playing a game with, they had 1 box of MREs and the unit hadn't eaten. And so they were giving out MREs, based on who could recite, their military, whatever it was, whatever their basically different questions and stuff of things that they were supposed to be learning. And so they were using it as a way to play a game, but that meant like people weren't getting fed. And so I contacted, my representative at the time, and I got to give him credit. He's James, I think what's his name, Jamie Raskin, and he's a Democrat. He's not particularly, I'm not particularly fond of him about anything, but I got to give him credit because he did contact the command and say, "What the heck is going on?" And he called me personally when I had messaged his office, and and the next thing you know, they were getting things straightened out on the base to make sure there were enough people there, to feed the troops. And so, but they went for like 2 days without getting meals, which is just insane.
Right.
They're going through training and all of that. But this was the kind of stuff that was going on. They had no preparation for this sort of thing at all. They were not prepared.
Correct. And I dealt with many of those cases as well. We had across multiple installations, once again, we had folks that were being put into quarantine, and they weren't being checked on by their leadership. They were ordered to not come out of their rooms. They were not being checked on. So in a lot of cases, they were yelling at their buddies, "Hey, bring me food." And then we had FRGs, so family readiness groups, that were putting together food banquets and bringing it to the service members and having people that were allowed to bring the food in while the military was not taking care of their own. It was a very wild time. This happened to thousands of service members who were not taken care of in the barracks. And of course, during this time, the isolation and the breakdown caused a skyrocketing escalation in suicide and alcohol dependency and everything else. And it was really bad for the military. And we were exposing all of this along with many others.
Yeah, there was a concerted effort to keep all of this quiet, and and there were a lot of really poor decisions made by leadership. But I mean, this is how it is in life, right? You don't really find out, the how good of a leader you have until you're faced with a situation that requires actual real leadership. And oftentimes, a lot of these guys, I think they, go through the ranks, get promoted and whatever, end up getting a command, but they really have never led anything. And so, they're just order takers and they're following orders and they're not showing leadership. And that's what we saw in that case at Fort Gordon, which was pretty bad. And eventually the base commander got, once Congress got involved, then all of a sudden, he was, instead of owning it and realizing that he had screwed up, he had gone home, for the weekend and basically left the base, to fend for itself. And he got it, got his butt, called to the fire. And, and instead of owning it, and he got angry at the troops and, reprimanded the troops, but he had contacted their congressman.
Right.
So
100%.
Of course, it wasn't just one. There were multiple members of Congress that had contacted the base to ask what the hell is going on.
Well, this happened over and over and over for years, for just hundreds and hundreds of incidents. I have seen so many letters sent to representatives. I can't even count how many there were, but I dealt with this for years. And in a lot of cases, these representatives would reach out to the base command. And the base command would say, everything's fine here, nothing to see. And they would go back to that service member and say, we investigated it. We talked to so-and-so. They said everything is good. Essentially, piss off. We did our due diligence. And that was why it was incumbent on these social media pages to expose what was happening and to shine a light on, well, and it wasn't just me. It was a lot of them. But like you said, these base commanders, what did they do? Instead of fix the problem and say, hey, we got an issue here. No, they came after the whistleblowers. They came after folks like me and the service members who talked to the representatives. They wanted to silence us and crush us. And obviously my story, they tried to throw me in jail for it and have me dishonorably discharged. So that was a reality.
Yeah. This is the challenge. And I would say anybody listening right now that has not served in the military, it is one thing you got to understand that's different from military life than civilian life is you are under a strict regime of essentially this strict chain of command that you are not allowed to go outside of. And it's more of a cultural experience. And so when you do go outside of it, even though you are legally allowed to, if something, if you're being given an unlawful order, you are going to pay a price for it. There's no doubt about it. And what I've seen, and I've seen this over and over again in my own experience in the military, and then excuse me, not only was I an Army veteran myself and did 3.5 years in the Army, but I also worked for the Navy for 9 years as a Navy civilian, and then I did several more years as a Navy contractor. I've worked as a Marine civilian. I've worked in the intelligence community, and I have seen this happen over and over again, where a whistleblower sees something, they report it, and instead of the issue getting fixed, the whistleblower is punished and retaliated against, and that is not uncommon at all. The challenge that I would say to people who and I would say there's probably a lot of people who are in leadership in the military that say, oh, well, this person stepped out of line. They had the potential to cause disruption and disorder, in this machine that needs to function and work. Well, I would say, those who join the military, while yes, they are sacrificing and they are giving, up certain freedoms that the rest of America takes for granted, it does not change the fact that they still are American citizens and that they have rights. And in fact, that is why our military is a all volunteer military. It is not to be ran like a dictatorship, and like a totalitarian regime. It really is supposed to function in a way that respects the rights, of those volunteers who are there serving their country. But unfortunately, what happens is in this world of chain of command, oftentimes things get hidden. There's abuses that happen, and nobody ever knows because of the way that the chain of command is. And I'm a victim of that myself. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I was just going to say, oh, go ahead.
I've dealt with that myself when I was in, the military. Yeah, sorry, there's a little bit of a delay between us, so my apology, folks. But yeah, I've had that experience myself. I've seen that experience with others, and it is a real problem. And so what it does is it takes an issue like COVID and a problem that there's been no training, nobody sat down and said, okay, what do we do if there's this issue? And the military is actually really good at training, but they did not train for this. They had no idea what they were dealing with. And I think that there were forces at play, and I don't think it's a far stretch, and people may call it a conspiracy theory, but I don't care. The reality is that there were drug companies that were using our own soldiers as experiments to experiment on, and that is not lawful.
Correct. We have the test studies. There was a test study that was conducted by Pfizer that was in collaboration with the DoD to hand over all EUA test data from both service members and their family members, not with their consent, mind you, but just handing it over. And keep in mind that the only vaccine that was administered to service members was the EUA vaccine. That was why the implementation of the COVID mandate was unlawful. Okay, so Pfizer took all of that test data, and they probably saved themselves hundreds of millions of dollars by having all of the demographic information, the medical history, everything you can possibly imagine on the service member, and then what the vaccine did when it was administered to them. They got all of that for free by collaborating with the DoD. We've pushed that documentation out multiple times. Real thing. So you're correct.
And this to me is the central problem with, the way things are today. While I respect the fact that the Trump administration has ended the mandates, I think Pete Hegseth has done a good job of going after things like, the DEI and the wokeism that had, infected the military. There has not been a reckoning for the violations of law and of the civil rights violations that were done against our troops during COVID. You have multiple members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that should be, in my opinion, recalled. Whether they've retired or not, they should be recalled and they should be court-martialed because what they 100%. Did was unlawful. And I also believe that Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, he flat out, it just completely ignored the law, and he issued an emergency use authorization medication without the president's even, and I've got nothing good to say about Biden, but Biden didn't, he's not even responsible for that because Lloyd Austin's the one who made that decision, and he did not have the right to make that decision under the law.
Well, I will tell you with Austin and all that, people need to understand the nuances of this, the shell game that was being played. Even Austin, and I hate to defend the man because he's as bad as they come, but let me defend him really quick from what you just said. Austin issued a legal order. The order, the mandate itself said that the order would be fulfilled with an FDA-approved vaccine. The issue is that Austin allowed all of his service components to break the law when Terry Aderam issued a memo September 14th that stated the two vaccines could be used interchangeably for the purpose of the mandate, which is a violation of the law. So they came down behind his legal mandate and they implemented it unlawfully because Pfizer had declared that they weren't going to create an FDA-approved version. So when they came out with the FDA-approved the BLA licensing in August 23rd of 2021, and they implemented the mandate the very next day on August 24th. You look at that BLA licensing, not only did they issue it on August 23rd, but they revoked it the same day. And they didn't implement a new BLA licensing on Comirnaty. Comirnaty was the FDA-approved vaccine until December. But the issue was, even then, they still didn't have a produced FDA-approved version. They only had the EUA. So this whole time, they are kicking troops out, and the numbers start racking up into the thousands, and they never had an FDA-approved version to actually administer in compliance with the Secretary of Defense's lawful order.
Now let me ask you something, because this is an area where I have been concerned at the lack of transparency. The military keeps its own records, its own medical records. They have their own version of VAERS, but it's specifically
Correct.
with troops.
DMED.
Yes. Has any of that information been made public about the numbers of adverse reactions to these vaccines that were given to our troops?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because, and this is something else we reported on and covered at the time, and it was a very scary time because this information was very damning to the DoD. That data came out in early of 2022. DMED itself was fairly unknown to medical providers. And I found this out much later, that a lot of medical providers didn't even know they could access the system. But let me explain what the Defense Medical Epidemiology Database actually is. Like you said, it's similar to VAERS. However, instead of anybody being able to input information, it's only being input by providers. So medics, PAs, doctors, whoever, nurses, but only medical providers within the military can put that data in there. And so what happens is, every time, say you go to the doctor for a broken arm and you get seen 3 times for the same broken arm, it's going to show as 3 events in DMED. Okay. So it's not every single incident. It's every time you were seen for that event. What we saw was abortions. So I'm not talking about people getting an abortion on their own. I'm talking about they lost their baby. Spontaneous abortions, myocarditis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, all sorts of neurological diseases skyrocket, some of them into the thousands of percentile. So when this data came out and was released by Senator Johnson through a whistleblower, and that whistleblower was Dr. Teresa Long, Lieutenant Colonel type, who is still actively serving, and her career was absolutely smashed by her superiors for this. Keep in mind, there's way too much to talk about in this podcast with that, but she exposed this data, and within a week, they had taken down the database. Several media outlets came out with a fluff article and said that there was corruption in the database. They scrubbed the database and brought it back up, and now the numbers weren't nearly as bad as what they were prior to that. And that database has gone through so many changes that we don't even know if we can accurately use that database anymore for commanders to have oversight of their formations and know what the health of their force is. It's that bad. So right now, I won't tell you who, but there's a team in the military that is actively working under Bobby Kennedy to go through all that VAERS reporting, all that DMED data, and find out specifically what has happened in the military and how many people were harmed. And I'm gonna put this out on your show, even though I shouldn't. But there was a doctor who approached. What is the organization that starts with a C? I'm having a brain fart. The CDC. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. So a doctor approached the CDC for this VAERS data and said that they were tracking a certain number. And the person on the other end of that phone goes, "Oh, no. Actually, we're tracking 2,100 service members have died from this." And so this team has to go through and verify what the actual numbers of the actual number of not only harmed service members, but how many died in relation to the vaccine. Now, I'm not saying on your show that it is 2,100. I'm saying that a representative from CDC stated that they were tracking 2,100 service members had died due to the COVID vaccine. That was what this team was told. And that's a frightening number. So
it is.
We shall see.
Well, and I think about, because if that's numbers of people who died, how many people were permanently injured, were basically chaptered out on medical afterwards, that would have, we saw our numbers, in the military between those that they kicked out for refusing to take the vaccine, but probably I'm guessing the numbers that were chaptered out for various ailments that were caused by, these vaccines. It just decimated our military.
Well, you look at Carolina
and this is the thing that, to me.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No. You please go ahead.
if you look at Carolina Stanczyk, and I use her as an example all the time, she was a service member. She was in AIT at the time. I believe she was around 19, maybe 20 years old. And she got the vaccine, and within 2 years had 3 heart attacks, 2 strokes, and now at the age of 25 is wearing a pacemaker. Okay. So she is the only person, as far as I know, that has been actually, the military has been forced to confirm that her condition is due to the COVID vaccine. The only person who has been confirmed. And the only reason she got that far was because Catherine Herridge came out and did a huge interview and exposed all this stuff around Carolina Stanczyk. But I have personally spoken to, if not in the thousands, at least in the high hundreds of service members who now have heart-related issues and all kinds of other stuff. I have met personally dozens of service members. I met a guy when I went to talk at this meeting with Secretary of War and Undersecretary of War on September 3rd. I met a guy, a CW3, who had just been selected to serve in the 160th SOAR, which you know is a Special Operations Aviation Regiment. It is our premier element that flies special operators into combat. This guy now has neurological condition. They've allowed him to continue to serve, but basically it looks like he has cerebral palsy. Not an aggressive form of it, but his body is slightly twisted up and he can't use his hand anymore. They ruined this guy's career. They ruined this CW3's career who had just been selected to 160th SOAR, the preeminent flight organization in the military, and his career is over. I mean, he'll never fly again. And I think I look at all of the special operators who drop dead while running. We're talking about fit guys in their mid 20s to mid 30s who were PT studs and were dropping dead during PT tests, during selection events, during warrant officer basic course for Green Berets. They have a separate warrant officer basic course, and we had a Green Beret that dropped dead during one of their PT tests. I mean, so many of these cases, and this could have been prevented if our doctors had done their due diligence and we had that surveillance net in place, which is DMED. DMED is there for that reason. And if they had not ignored it and they had looked at what was actually taking place instead of going along with the system, and that's like I told you, there were very few doctors, 4, if I'm not mistaken, who actually came out and blew the whistle on this stuff. I work for one of them now, Dr. Pete Chambers, but very few who actually came out and exposed what was happening and said, no, I will not waive informed consent for my service members. You are unlawfully administering an EUA vaccine. This is emergency. This has not been tested. You don't know what it's going to do. We already have reports of people being harmed and everything else. I will not give this to my service members. And my boss in particular was fired. He was fired from his job, and they replaced him with a doctor who would waive informed consent. That is illegal. That is jail time. They did it anyways. And this happened in mass across the entire military.
So I want to kind of shift our conversation a little bit, because I think there's more to the story, that because of what you do and the people that reach out to you that are whistleblowers. And I know exactly how that goes, because as a former whistleblower myself, when my story went public, I had people come out of the woodwork and reach out to me, whistleblowers themselves, some of them on very serious matters, because they don't know where to turn to. They didn't know who to turn to, and they knew that I had survived.
There you go.
And so they reached out to me. So I'm sure you've got people like that reaching out to you, probably, likely military folks. There's clearly been an op against President Trump, against Pete Hegseth, attempting to destroy, Trump's vision of restoring the military and Pete Hegseth's vision of making a strong fighting force. What can you tell me about the deep state's fight against them and what has been happening behind the scenes?
Well, just personally, I've exposed dozens of JAG officers at very high ranks that have been working behind the scenes, very, very public in their statements of speaking out against just posting vile stuff in some cases just posting things like they were going to maliciously comply with any executive order that took transgenders out of the military or tried to remove DEI. We saw an overt effort from the JAG Corps. And the JAG Corps is the most corrupt of them all because they are the ones who hold the commander's ear. You know as well as I do that every commander out there doesn't even wipe their butt until a JAG officer tells them they're allowed to legally. And so we saw JAG openly subvert. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm glad that you brought that up. There are some very specific things that I've seen with JAG officers in particular in the last year, still under the new leadership even, that is still going on, that is highly corrupt. And we definitely, I don't want to talk about it online right now, but I want to talk with you offline about it. But yeah, explain to folks, because there is a unique dynamic. I would say it's the biggest fear that a probably a commander has is doing something that costs him his rank and his position and gets him in trouble legally. So they rely a lot on these JAG officers for legal counsel, and that gives them a lot of influence. Oftentimes, I think undue influence. And I saw this. It's not just the military. Years ago, I was I was an elected city councilman, and I had things that I was elected to do that I could not get done because the city legal counsel, who in my opinion was somebody who really had an agenda and didn't give a crap about what the people wanted. He was basically putting a stop to everything that I was trying to do by basically coming in and threatening that we were going to get sued, which was complete bullcrap. There had already been case law, that had already gone to the Supreme Court and had already, been ruled that it was legal. And in my case, it had an issue of getting rid of or basically condemning property where the police had to continue to keep going out to because of drug dealers continuing to sell drugs out of apartment complexes and slumlords basically allowing that sort of thing. So it was I was trying to get a law passed to clean that up, and he basically was able to stop it. But I've seen the same thing happen in the military and in pretty much everywhere. The lawyers have a lot of influence, and oftentimes they don't speak the truth, or they don't research something, or they just go with whatever their agenda is. And we know that a lot of these lawyers, these JAG officers, got their law degrees at liberal universities and things like that. So, yeah,
and there are a number of JAG whistleblowers who have come to me. That's how I've gotten the information I've gotten, and they've told me, they've sent me social media posts, but then they've also told me what's going on behind the scenes within their organizations. And I can tell you flat out that there have been direct orders given from senior JAG officers to subordinate JAG officers to not take certain things to the TJAG. Now you got to keep in mind, specifically in the Army, what Trump did. Trump brought a 2-star general from I believe it was the Guard Reserve, or it was an outside component. Okay, so the JAG is very nepotistic. All right, they breed from within. You don't get higher. You don't move up the chain to the big boy positions unless you check the blocks and you meet the ideological criteria that they want you to meet. And that ideological criteria was established by Obama. Okay, let's make no mistake. Obama established what the military is now. And through the course of the last decade and a half, we saw that really mature into the general officers that we have now, into the JAG Corps, and to other components where those senior leaders were selected based on their ideological agendas and willingness to carry water for really what amounts to neo-Marxist ideology. And they were very aggressive about writing and establishing policies for DEI, which we know is a tool for Marxists. And so when Trump took that away, they flat out said no, and we will do everything we can to subvert that and overcome that. And we have seen stagnation within the Department of War for months and months and months now over a simple executive order. Trump said, bring back service members who were kicked out unlawfully for not taking the COVID shot. And 9 months later, we have maybe, I don't know what the count is now, but maybe it's 3 or 4. And that's also contrary to what they stated in articles earlier this spring when they said that they had 13 that they had brought back in. It's a flat out lie. We know factually because we've spoken to the heads of the Human Resources Command at these places who said, we haven't brought anybody back in. We have service members who are trying to get back in. And a person I know personally, a sergeant first class, was the first one in the Army to get back in. And that was several weeks ago. But it isn't for a lack of Hegseth not following through. It's not for a lack of Tata not following through. They're giving these orders. And what is Hegseth supposed to do as the Secretary of War? Is he supposed to go down to every single component and make sure they're doing their job correctly? No. But at the same time, it is incumbent on Hegseth to root out this rot in our military that runs contrary to the Constitution of the United States and fire these people. And so far,
absolutely,
as much as I've tried to support Hegseth and what he's doing, we continue to see people getting promoted who are absolutely on the bad boy list and have been some of the most aggressive sponsors of DEI in the military. And that is a problem. If you're not going to get rid of these people, you're going to continue to see this non-compliance and malicious behavior in regards to Trump's agenda. It's just a fact of the matter.
Yeah. Now, you're also, you have another organization that you work with, Remnant Ministries. What kind of work are you doing there? And tell me a little bit about that and what your main focus is with that group.
Main focus is humanitarian relief and countering human trafficking. Remnant Ministries was started by Dr. Pete Chambers, and this is a guy who served 39 years in uniform between the Guard, Reserve, and active Army. He started out in 1983 as an infantryman, became a doctor, became a flight surgeon, ended up at the age of 45 getting a waiver to go to Q course, and became a Green Beret. One of 5 people in the Army who has not gone from Green Beret to doctor, but gone from doctor to Green Beret. And
wow.
So the guy is a long tab special forces dude. His plan was to get out of the military, go work his ranch. He had some cattle that he was gonna, raise, and he ended up selling the cattle because he spent the last 8 years of his career in Operation Lone Star with the Texas National Guard on the border. He saw everything that took place on the border. He saw the invasion. He responded to the invasion. He was out there with his working dog as the sole Green Beret out on the border. Even as a doctor, he was working with his working dog, Joe. And this guy did what he could. Obviously, he can't stop a wave of millions of people coming through, but he did what he could. But when he was out there, he responded to these incidents, these just countless incidents of kids being abandoned, being left alone. And it broke his heart because he had to hand them off to Border Patrol. And then what happens to them? They go into the system, and who knows where they went.
Well,
and he said,
we found out through other whistleblowers that a lot of those kids under the Biden administration were handed off to people claiming to be family that weren't, that in fact were abusers and were basically taking these children and putting them into slave labor or in, sexual slavery. And it's just been a horrendous thing. And now I think, what was it, out of 300,000 kids that were missing or something like that? Now they've found, I think, 20,000 of them. 20,000. That's it. I mean, that's a lot.
I don't know how many they found, but I can tell you that 300
kids.
Yeah, that 300,000 number, that's nowhere near accurate. I know that's what the government officially declares, but you're right. Those are the ones we know about. That number is much higher. And so he saw this and he said, I can't allow this to continue under my watch. My country is falling apart. We're being invaded. I know the threat coming in from ISIS and Al Qaeda. I know the Islamic threat that's taking place in the overthrow that's happening within our own country. You can watch the other Western nations like the UK and see what's happening. You can watch Dearborn, Michigan. You can look down in Houston and watch what they're doing down there. It's so systemic and it's so out of control. And he just flat out said, I've got to do something about this. He started Remnant Ministry through the course of the work that he and I had both done. Like I said, he was a whistleblower. I was a whistleblower. We had kind of come come to meet each other. He was actually the first person who met me in real life and knew actually who I was. And I was kind of scared about that meeting. I was like, don't tell anybody. I'm not going to tell anybody. But we have known each other for years now. It's more than a resume. Like, paramount trust for one another doesn't even describe what we have. It's the core members of Remnant Ministry are a group of people who have sacrificed and put their careers and really, in some cases, potentially their freedom on the line for doing the right thing. And that speaks far more volume. You know, that speaks far more than a resume. And so that's how we came together. We responded to, I didn't respond to this, but they recently responded to the flood efforts down in Kerrville. We went out to North Carolina and responded to the hurricane stuff out there. We were doing humanitarian relief and helping out with organizations and supplies, but we were also doing counter human trafficking. And I can just tell you the kind of stuff he's been involved in and other members of our team is stuff that I couldn't even talk to you about offline, just because of how the danger it puts on these guys. And all of us now, just so you know, all of us have been personally targeted and attacked in some way physically. And I had an incident recently involving an incident at my house, which I'm not going to talk about online, but you know, the law enforcement responded to it and everything else. But there is danger to what we're doing, both in that realm and then the campaign that he's running as well. So,
yeah. Tell me about that. So, you know, Doc Pete Chambers has been campaigning, and you've been, you know, what's it been like working alongside him, you know, on his campaign? I ran for Congress the last election cycle. I lost in the primary, but it was one of the most meaningful, profound experiences I've ever had in learning about other people's lives and the things that are going on in the state, you know, that affect them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And how most of the time, you know, they're pretty much ignored. But I made friends all over the state and connected with people on a very deep and personal level. And it was an amazing experience. What can you tell me about that experience and working with him on his campaign?
It's been very eye-opening. We're all drinking from a fire hose, first of all, because none of us are politicians. None of us have worked on a campaign before. And when you tackle a beast like this, you know, you look at it from the outside and you look at it, okay, Governor Abbott, governor of Texas, $100 million war chest, 35 million Texans, it seems insurmountable. But when you break it down and you understand, okay, we have to get approximately 1.5 million votes to primary Abbott. That's the realistic number of what we have to get. We're running an unconventional campaign on a shoestring budget. We don't have any big donors. That's not because we haven't tried. That's the point of the campaign that we're at. Okay. So we're operating on a shoestring budget. We've had some wonderful donors come forward and offer venues, put things together for us, built websites for us, built videos for us, free of charge, just because they want to help. So in-kind donations are much higher, but actual cash donations, the things we need for advertising and stuff like that, very slim. And it's primarily, minus a couple cases, been all grassroots donations. So things under $100. And it has not stopped that man one bit. He is, I will tell you, he is 60 years old, just really quick, and I'll let you jump in, but really quick. He is 60 years old, and I've never seen anybody drive up and down the roads more than him. I'm like, this is exhausting, man. And he's just out there driving 7 hours this way across Texas and 5 hours this way. And he's probably watching this right now. And this doesn't give you a pass on your grumpiness for that text you sent me the other day, Doc. No, that's a joke. That's an inside joke. I was just trying to figure out logistics on something. I said, well, what's going on with such and these? Don't go then. No, it's not about me not going. I'll go. It was 6 hours away, but I'll absolutely go. I'm trying to figure out the logistics on this thing. Give me a break. But he is a ground pounder. He never stops working tirelessly. And it's wild to see. And
so
people love him when he gets out to these events.
This is the challenge that I think is a real problem in American politics today. I was in the same boat. I had never run for, other than a city councilman position, which I did a write-in campaign and won, but that was years, about 30 years ago. I had never run for anything really outside of that, and I ran for Congress, and it was what I found what I learned about the process that really was eye-opening was just how much money goes into politics, how much money goes into not just money from candidates that are donated. In fact, the majority of money that goes into a campaign, I don't believe is coming from the people. The people
That is
are
correct,
only
sir.
allowed to give $3,300 per person. That is it. They can't give any more than that. So when you hear, like for
Well,
example,
that's your
you
state.
hear about
Texas,
Elon.
they can give as much as they want in Texas. Just a side note. We have
Well,
different laws.
federal law. You're right.
Correct.
So
Federal. Right,
there's
right, right.
state law
Yeah.
and federal. I was running for Congress. So
Gotcha.
federal, it is a little different, but I imagine there's probably limitations as well, even on the state. But here's the thing that's crazy. In a federal race, the majority of the money is not coming from the individual donors. The majority of the money
Nope.
is coming from corporations. It's coming from LLCs. It's coming from 501c4s, which are basically they don't fall under the FEC guidance. What it is it's advertising money that goes into these things, and it could be coming from China, and we really would never
Right.
know because it's called dark money. That money is protected as free speech, and it is protected through, by the IRS. FEC has nothing to do with it. And as long as that money doesn't come into the campaign, they can go out and they can advertise all day long. And even though you're not supposed to have money that is, that advertising dollars aren't supposed to, like that, are not supposed to be in any kind of cooperation with the campaign, I guarantee you it is happening. There's no way that a company is going to go out and spend $1 million, trying to promote a candidate unless there's been some conversations, behind the scenes. And that is the
Yes,
kind of
sir.
crazy stuff that goes on. And it's why our politics are so corrupted. It's why when somebody gets in, it's really hard to get them out, because basically there are corporations and there are special interest groups that have invested millions of dollars to get what they want out of that candidate that they have bought.
You're correct.
And that is the truth of it. And I would go so far as to say that it's like this for everyone. It really is. It's not like I thought I could run a clean campaign without any dark money, without any, outside donor money from PACs or anything like that. I was wrong. You cannot win in a national race, and I would go so far as to say a governor race like in the state of Texas, without having money, because what happens is you end up getting out advertised. And even if you are a major, like I had probably out of all of the candidates in the race, I certainly without a doubt had the best ground game. I had the largest network of volunteers. It just wasn't enough because we couldn't knock on every door. We knocked on thousands of doors, but it wasn't enough. And so the majority of people out there didn't know who I was. Had they known,
Name recognition.
had I had
correct.
the money to do, absolutely, I would have won. There's no doubt about it. I had the most compelling story, the most interesting story that I think would have captured people's hearts, because especially in this state of West Virginia, as the person who blew the whistle on Hillary Clinton, they would have loved me, because the people of this state hated her for when she came to this state and said, "Oh, we're going to shut down all of your coal." And so, but I could not get that name recognition out there. I could not get the advertising dollars to really be competitive in that way. Still, even with that, I still raised over $140,000 just from individual donations, and had a lot of in-kind donations and things like that as well. So it was it was a great experience that I don't regret one bit. But man, we have a major problem in our
Yep, we
elections,
do.
and it is the way that money influences things.
And we see this all the time. We see from citizens that they say, I'm done voting. I'm tired of the same corruption, the same broken lies, the same promises, all the nonsense, all the filth with what we currently have as political leadership. And I say, you could overcome this very simply as a citizen if you just got off your couch and got invested. Well, I don't do politics. That's the problem. You should do politics. We could overcome all this dark money. We could overcome everything if you just showed up to the primaries and you primaried your guy. You know how many times I've heard people say, well, good luck in your election in November. It's not in November. The primary is March 3rd. The general election is in November. You need to understand that you have to primary the big guy first if you want Doc to come in.
Yep.
But people, the unawareness and the refusal to get involved because politics is just corrupt. Everybody lies. You've got to knock off that nonsense and grow up a little bit. You have to grow up and you have to take control of your destiny, of this country's future, and for what you want your kids to grow up in. And you have to go vote. Go to the primaries and vote.
Yeah.
You have to.
And I would go so far as to say that if you don't feel called to run for office, that does not get you off the hook from engaging with your political leaders. I mean, the people that do win, even if you didn't vote for them in the primary, you have to contact them. You've got to reach out to them. You got to let them know that you are interested in what it is that they are doing, because otherwise they won't. And I do think that the majority of people that go to, and maybe I'm being a little over generous, but just having been through the experience myself, I think that the majority of people that go to Washington, D.C. to represent, their district, I do believe actually care about their constituents. But if they don't hear from their constituents, then they're going to care about, the various interests and special interests that show up in their office. So it's critically important for you to speak out and contact your representatives. I don't think people even recognize, I don't think most people even know who the representative is. Let's just put it that way. They certainly don't know who the representatives are at the state level. And I would go so far as to say that most probably don't even know who their congressional representative is. And so when people want to bitch and moan about what's going on in Congress, about the government shutdown, about how our soldiers aren't getting paid and all this other crap that's going on, and they want to complain about it. Well, when was the last time you actually contacted your representative to tell them what you think? When was the last time you contacted your senator to tell them what you think? I guarantee you, if enough people do that, it's going to change. And don't just call, don't just write a letter, go to their office and ask to have a meeting with them. They represent you, so go and ask to see them and talk to them. And the fact is that, look, I ran a very hard race against Riley Moore, and I had my doubts about him. I had a lot of doubts about him because of his connections to, his aunt is our senator, and she's horrible. She's basically a major rhino, and I can't stand her because of the way that she votes. And so I was worried he was going to be the same way. I have kept in contact with him after I lost the election, and I have, basically I've emailed him, I've texted him, I've direct messaged him, I've met him at events and have talked to him personally. And I have come to believe that the man is a good man, and he's actually working hard to try to represent us. But I have to stay engaged because, the attention span of anybody, right? They're not just being courted by their constituents. They're being courted by every lobbyist that is out there, that is willing to help fund their campaign and their reelection. And we have to just recognize that is just the way it is. So we have to engage and get involved and make sure that we are in their faces, not in a mean and unproductive way, but in a way that says, hey, look, I'm your constituent. I'm the guy who voted for you. Sure, maybe these guys over here funded your election, but the fact is it still takes votes to get elected. And if enough people get that across to their representatives, I do believe that the majority of them will listen. Because at the end of the day, the only way that they are going to get reelected is by votes. And, you can only lie so much before, people are going to find you out. And so I think that getting involved and making sure that we're, talking to them, that we are engaging with them, that we're showing up to their offices, that we are, join your local, your local precinct, go join your local Republican club. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a Republican club until I moved, to West Virginia and decided to run for office. And that's when I found out that they actually had, a executive committee, and they had a Republican club for our county. And so I got involved, and it was a really fascinating thing. But there are a number of people out there, but like the percentage of people who actually care and that, get involved at all is very, very minute compared to the number of people that actually can vote. And then the number of people that actually vote it's a much smaller number than those who can vote. So it's,
and you know what
and you're right.
I'd say, start your own club. You know what I've seen a lot of? I've seen a lot. The age demographic at a lot of these Republican clubs is old. It's fact of the matter. I see very few young people. Where do I see young people? They're showing up to Turning Point USA events. They're showing up for young Republican events. Go start your own club and make a difference. If you're 20 years old, I get it. You don't want to hang out with Grandma Bertha and listen to the tea club party and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. I'm not saying that you should have to do that. But what I am saying is that you can be a force, gather your friends together, be a driving element at your age in your area, and then consider just partnering with the other organizations. You don't have to go to their meetings and everything, but maybe share meeting notes. But be an element that connects across wavelengths and actually try to make change instead of just complaining about it. And to be honest, I am seeing more young people in the 20-year-old age range that are seeing how important this stuff is, and they're going after it aggressively. It's guys my age. I'm 42. It's guys my age who have given up and are saying, "Nah, it's just
yes, you're
politics.
right.
I won't do anything."
It's interesting. The left really screwed up in assassinating Charlie Kirk.
They sure did.
That it has awakened this generation like nothing I've ever seen, both in the area of revival and in political, involvement.
Amen,
I am seeing things happen, and it really is true that there is something to be said about, the ultimate sacrifice, and, that produces fruit like greater than anything. Look at when Christianity grew the most. It was during its greatest persecution. And I think that's what we're seeing today. And I'm hopeful that this terrible thing that happened that Satan meant for evil, God is going to turn it around for good in this country. And I'm already seeing it with the whole, the transgenderism, issue has just been so destructive. And it really is like a mind virus that has affected our youth.
Yep.
And something has shifted. I'm seeing it. Like even on the left, you're beginning to see people, breaking ranks and saying this is nonsense. This is an affront to, to women, to allow these men in women's sports. This is a child abuse, to push this crap on kids. And so it's starting to happen. I'm seeing the shift beginning now, and thank God, because it really is, the Bible warns about, a time where people call what is evil good and what is good evil. And I feel like we've been living in that for the last, 4 or 5 years. And, now, in my opinion. Yeah, I would agree. I think it has been longer than that. In fact, I think Trump's first term was basically in the midst of all of that. And that's why they just, it was like the hordes of hell came out to try to destroy his presidency even before he got elected, as we're finding out. And, they were spying on him and running operations, against him before he even got elected and after he got elected. So,
right. And to your point, what I'd say is I've seen the same thing on the left pushing back against the transgender agenda, because, even the, the LGBTQ community, Well, you got the folks
Oh,
that are
yeah.
coming out and saying the LGBTQ community, and they're like, don't saddle us with these nut jobs. And in no way am I defending homosexuality right now. But at the same time,
No,
you
but
have people that are saying, this is bonkers. I don't want to be coupled with these wackos who don't know whether they're a girl or a boy. I'm a girl and I like girls, or I'm a
right.
boy and I like boys,
And
but I know who I am.
yeah, and who were pushing, who clearly have an agenda of pushing the stuff on the, minors in our country.
Yep.
There's clearly some crazy crap that has been going on in this country, and this push towards pedophilia and all of that. I'm glad to see that people are waking up on both sides and are saying, "Hey, whoa, we got to stop this crap. This has got to end." And I'm hopeful that we will, see it into it. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while before it reaches places like California, New York, and some of these other, majorly blue states. But we are starting to see it in the culture, and that when you see it in the culture begin to break, then it's not long until it's going to finally break, I think.
I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely.
So, what do you see? I mean, we talked about voting, but what other and joining or starting organizations, but what can people do that want to get involved in defending our freedoms and supporting veterans who have been silenced?
People need to understand what veterans are dealing with right now. There's a societal collapse of, let's just call it morale. I don't know what else to call it, but basically after 2021 and the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and then tack on the COVID stuff and people getting just mercilessly beat and thrown out of the military for their constitutional rights to refuse the vaccine. There is a serious mental health issue in the veteran community right now of people that are either depressed and they don't know how to deal with life, or people who are just flat out angry. And what I want to do is I want to encourage those veterans who did the right thing and raised their hands to defend their country. They had noble purpose. They did not know that their country was going to use them for nefarious purposes. They did not know that they were going to be treated this way and be denied constitutional rights and all these other things. However, those same people, their mind is the same. They might be disgruntled and beat and everything else, but you can still serve. You can still serve your country. And it involves getting out and taking action in these issues and getting involved. And the easiest way, without picking up a gun and doing something crazy, because you see those boogaloo dudes online, and you're like, stop it. You do not want civil war. That is the last thing you want. Get involved in
Anybody
your local
asking,
politics.
anybody calling for that? Yeah, anybody calling for that? It just, every time I see that kind of nonsense, I just think this is somebody who's never seen combat. This is not somebody who's ever been in a war,
Right.
who's probably never left their hometown, let alone left their country to be in another country where there's that kind of death and destruction. The last thing that we would ever, anybody who's ever seen that kind of thing would ever want to see in our country would be that kind of violence. It is unbelievably destructive. And you're right. What people need to do is, rather than fantasizing about that kind of nonsense, they should engage and try, to engage the culture, engage their community, and, get involved with, like-minded people that want to see change in their community.
Let me tell you this. What Doc Chambers has proposed and what he will do on day one, a complete revamp of the Texas State Guard. So the Texas State Militia, not National Guard, but the State Guard. He is going to reform it, and it is going to be a component that acts in unison with DPS, with law enforcement. His idea, his plan, which he has already laid on with several Tier 1 operators, is to develop special missions units. So similar to CAG or SEAL Team 6 or any of these other guys, develop special missions units within the Texas State Guard, and have at least a battalion of people that are law enforcement credentialed. Okay, so these are going to be very hard to get into. Okay, so there's going to be room for cooks and admin folks and intel folks and all that. Not saying that there isn't, but there's going to be components out there that are trained at the highest levels. This is not a free pass, but it gives purpose to those veterans. We have the highest veteran population in the United States in Texas, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I believe we have the highest population.
I think you're right.
those folks, we want them to serve again, and we want them to serve their country and defend their state and the borders, the very thing that they wanted to do in the first place. They wanted to defend their constitution. They wanted to defend their country. Now you can. We want to put those folks to work immediately with the full backing of the state, so that they have the ability to do what they need to do and actually arrest people and take people down and defend exactly what the Biden administration and, to be honest, Abbott allowed to come across the Texas southern border for years until anything was done about it. Yes, Trump has put a tourniquet on it, but we have 1,000 cuts and so many issues in this state right now. We need help, and we need those veterans, those guys who already raised their right hand to serve and were burned by their country, to come serve again. Texas has a place for you. We want you to serve, and it will be hard, and it will be the demanding stuff that you originally signed up for, not this cakewalk crap that we saw for the last however many years under Biden, but real military standards and hard stuff, defending your state. That's how we want to do this, and bring these guys back into the fold and give them purpose again. Veterans need purpose.
Yep. And by the way, just to confirm, Texas is the highest number of veterans in the U.S. With about 1.4 million, and that was as of 2022, according to the U.S. Census Bureau data. The California, I think, is at like 1.3, and Florida at 1.4, and but Texas has the largest overall number. So yeah, I mean, it's 1.4 million Americans living in your state that have the capacity, have the training, have they've all sworn the oath to the Constitution, and to protect and defend and serve, this country. So it makes sense to, put those veterans to work. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes. And we will take care of them, and there will be benefits for those folks who do this type of stuff. So we gotta get Doc in office first.
Well, Sam, where can people follow you? You mentioned your Instagram channel.
Yeah, I don't.
Are you on X?
Instagram? Come follow me personally on X. My personal account is Samosaur, just like a dinosaur, just Samosaur.
Okay.
Right. So come follow me on Twitter and see what we're doing, and then go to docpetechambers.org. Check out the website. Check out the next governor of Texas. That's where I really want you to go. docpetechambers.org.
Yep. And folks, look, Texas really is the front line against all of the human trafficking that is going on in this country. That all of the drugs that are coming in through the border. A lot of that is right there in Texas. Has that large border, that is basically bordering Mexico. So it's important. It's important that we help. Look, if you are somebody that maybe you live in a blue state, or maybe you live in an area where you don't have a good choice for governor, support these candidates that are running for office in other states like Texas. And I would say any congressional office, really you should be looking at those too, because at the end of the day, they may not, you may not be able to vote for them, but they can vote for you by their actions and the things that they're doing. So I would definitely encourage you guys to check out. Let's see here. It is docpetechambers.org. That's DOCPETE chambers, just like it sounds, .org. And I would encourage you guys to go check that out. Well, Sam, it's been a great conversation with you. I always like to ask my guests at the end of our conversation. We've been talking for about a little over an hour. What do you want people to take away from our conversation, more than anything?
I want people to truly understand. I don't want to be a panic in here, but I want people to truly understand, if you don't already, that our nation is under attack. America, the United States of America, is the last bastion of freedom in the entire world. We're watching countries collapse one by one. If the light of freedom goes out in America, it goes out across the rest of the world. Okay. You need to get involved. You have to stop being apathetic. That is our number one. That is the most dangerous thing that we have right now. That is the number one issue in security is our apathy. Okay, America is not the America that it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. You have to get involved, whether it's politics, getting involved locally, whatever it may be. Get off your couch, get out of Netflix, stop being apathetic, working your 9-to-5 job and just tuning the world out, and get involved, or you will not have a country left in a very short period of time, at least not the country you want to live in. It's a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we have our role to play, we also have to recognize we need God's help. And
Yes.
that is one of the reasons I always like to end my show in prayer. And so we're going to do that now. Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you so much, Lord, for those who are standing up to defend this country, Lord, whether it is our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, Lord, that are serving this country, sacrificing their own freedom so that we can enjoy ours, whether it is those who are running for office and who are serving in government, oftentimes a thankless job. But Lord, I do pray and ask that you would raise up righteous men and women to run for office, that you would raise up from amongst the people, Lord, those that are going to put their neighbor before themselves and truly be servants of the people. And Lord, we lift up our law enforcement, our members of our National Guard, our ICE, all the people who are involved in trying to keep us safe. Lord, I pray you would protect them. Lord, like none of us, we can only hope to defend ourselves or defend, each other. But ultimately, Lord, our lives are in your hands, as are theirs. And we pray and ask, God, that you would keep them safe and protect them, especially as they remove dangerous people out of our country. And Lord, we pray that you would wake up America's youth and, even our middle-aged folks, Lord, who maybe they just don't care. Maybe they're apathetic. I pray that you'd wake them up to realize that they need to engage and they need to be involved. And for our young people, Lord, that you would help them to see past the propaganda and the lies and the cultural Marxism that is being pushed and that they're being indoctrinated into on our university campuses. I pray, God, that those scales would fall off their eyes and they would see the truth. And as we are seeing many, Lord, who have witnessed the events unfolding around Charlie Kirk's death, Lord, we just pray that you would continue the work that you've begun to take what was meant for evil and turn it around for good. And I pray your blessing over Sam and over the organization that he is involved with. And I pray, God, that you would just help keep those that are involved in Remnant Ministries safe, protect Doc Pete Chambers and Sam and others who are involved, as it's oftentimes a very dangerous job going up against the cartels and going up against the people who have no problem killing and taking another human life. We just pray your protection over all of them. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, folks, thank you again for joining. We had 1,500, a little over 1,500 on the show tonight watching live, and I want to thank you guys for joining. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and after the show is finished, send it out to, retweet it out to people so they can see this content and hear from Sam and what he's been talking about tonight. I want to thank all of you guys. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and make sure that you stay engaged. With that, have a great night, and God bless.
Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night. We'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change. The time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.